Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. What I'm also going to do is I'm not going to put my PowerShell, my PowerPoint into a kind of a slideshow mode. I'm just going to do it manually from here, only because I've got quite a few windows out here, plus the control of the link to the desktop. I don't want to be clicking a wrong button, so to speak. The title is Get-PowerShell, Get-SharePoint. I'm going to try as it's basically introduce you to PowerShell, and then we'll apply it for various in various situations, databases, just reading, writing to files, and so on. And then eventually we'll do some examples in SharePoint. I had quite a few more. I've kind of condensed this. My original deck was about 75 to 90 minutes, but I've condensed it a bit. But there's a lot of meat in here. There's a lot of code in here. That's important. This is a brief introduction to myself. I'm based in Hartford, Connecticut. It's about nearly 3 hours north of New York. It's exactly in between Boston and New York on the East Coast. I work as an architect, developer, contractor work. I also have my own software company, more of an entrepreneur. I'm also a Microsoft MVP for SharePoint Workspace. I grew using Groove, primarily Groove. I was using Groove. I was one of the earliest beta testers for Groove when it first came out. Sorry about that. I'm very active as a SharePoint developer, literally not just starting architecting the whole thing, but my specialty really is in the mid-tier, integrating SharePoint to backend LOB system, BizTalks, a lot of BCS, WCF, and so on. My specialty is really in the mid-tier. If you look at a 3-tier architecture, I'm mostly in the mid-tier, the business logic and integrating to SharePoint. Far less on the UI portion, the CSS stuff. I have very little knowledge on that. Anyway, I'm an acting director of Connecticut.NET Developers Group. It's one of the largest groups in New England area. We've got about 2,300 members. And we also have a Connecticut SharePoint group, which is kind of a sub-part of the Connecticut .NET group. So I run those two groups as well. I don't blog as much. I have a blog. It's been around for a long time. There are a couple of reasons I don't blog. One is in a lot of my contractual work, if you look at the fine line of the contract, they don't want you to blog about anything while you're working for them. A lot of the people I work for are really financial companies and healthcare companies. They're very strict laws, HIPAA and Sarbanes-Oxley laws and so on. They're very sensitive about any kind of dissemination of information. So whatever I do is primarily, I'm very active on SharePoint Exchange, Stack Exchange, except for the last 2 months. I'm just kind of taking a little break. Fairly active there, a lot of technical stuff in there too. There's my email, my Twitter, fairly active with Twitter. I'm very active with Facebook. I do a lot of Facebook development as well, literally writing the API SDK, and also from the business side. So that's me, and let's jump right into it. Okay, it's 12:02, so I didn't waste any time there. Okay, this is basically the agenda I have in mind. What is Windows PowerShell? What's in it? How to use it? And then we'll go through a couple of key applications of it: WMI, SQL servers, and then SharePoint administration and development. It's kind of overarching view of SharePoint, the PowerShell for a SharePoint thing. Please keep in mind it's midnight here, so if I'm a bit faulty in my speech or anything, just let me know. But I will not fall asleep. That's for sure. It'll be too bad if I fall asleep on my own presentation. Anyway, so let's just dive in. Basically, what PowerShell is, it's a scripting language. It'll remind you of DOS, the old batch BAT files and so on. And it is extensible in the sense like it really sits on top of the .NET platform. So you can write commandlets and functions and modules, libraries, and you can extend the language. So you can, it's much like, it is replacing STS-ADM, 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 and so on. In fact, slowly STS-ADM is being deprecated out from SharePoint work. So if you're in SharePoint and you've been using STS-ADM, you got to say goodbye to it and move to the world of PowerShell. So it's a good thing to learn, and it's the same all over other Microsoft products as well. You can write, since it's it's a text. The scripts are text-based. You can really use a notepad or any text-based editor, or you could use some other development environment. There are a couple of them out there. I'll briefly go over them. And the one I use is called Power GUI. And we'll go over them. There are quite some good ones out there. Yeah, it's like a Visual Studio type of environment, development environment, for a scripting environment for PowerShell. The key thing about PowerShell is that it really leverages the .NET platform. All the classes and objects and properties and methods that you have in the .NET classes, the libraries, they're all available. And I will show you plenty of scripts showing you how you can use those and script around those. And so in essence, almost in essence, whatever you can write in VB.NET or C#.NET, you can do it in PowerShell, or vice versa. And since it sits on top of the .NET application layer, it'll talk to the Exchange object model, the SQL Server, the SharePoint, the Active Directory. I have an example here of a small script showing you how it can talk even to your IIS, your ASP.NET IIS 7 onwards. You can script that as well. And Active Directory if you're in an enterprise environment. And of course SharePoint, and I'll show you SQL Server, how it can be scripted for SQL Server and SharePoint. Okay, very briefly about the PowerShell environment. Since you're scripting, you can use a notepad or any text-based editor. There are a couple of free, the PowerShell ISC, the interactive scripting thing, comes when you are in Windows 7 or the new servers, 2008 and so on. You already have that. I'm just going to show it to you over here. Okay, I don't have, if you just type in PowerShell, you see a Windows PowerShell ISC. If you click on that, you get the built-in, the standard scripting editor, which looks like this. I'm going to, and then the other way is you can get the command line. And this is the command line. It's almost like if you remember your DOS prompt. It's exactly like that. You could, it looks a lot like Unix right now. In fact, ls is a Unix command. Now, why do I like PowerShell a lot? I like SharePoint a lot too. But the reason why I like PowerShell a lot is I came up in computing. My career spans well over 20 years as an old Unix guy. I was big into BSD Unix and so on. And we had things like we had Corn shell, C shell, Bourne shell, so a lot of scripting language and something like that. So PowerShell, in a way, is kind of it's almost like a resurrection of the old Unix scripting thing. But PowerShell, I've noticed, is a lot more powerful, and it's primarily because of the .NET layer underneath it. As we go through examples, you'll kind of begin to appreciate how it all comes together. A couple of things. Security, as you know, is a very big thing, especially if you're working for big enterprises. By default, everything in PowerShell is locked down. You really cannot execute scripts. You've got to set up execution policies and so on. You can also remotely, PowerShell will also allow you to remotely execute script in another environment. Say when you RDP over to a remote server, instead of, you can set up the script whatever, but you can invoke the script remotely as well. That's a very powerful concept, and you can do remote access via RPC, WS Manager, and WMI. We'll go through this Windows management instrumentation. But whatever it is, be assured that all the scripting and everything is very secure. You also have, since you have the .NET security layer mechanism underneath, you could have code modules that are signed and so on. So all the security is there. There is no compromise whatsoever in the security policy. I'm not going to go into detail about it, but it's something I would, if you're working in large enterprises and you're going to execute scripts and so on, it'll benefit you to go over what the security mechanisms are, how you can turn it off, turn it on. Okay. All right, let's just dive into code. Any questions so far? I'm just going to pop back before I dive into this code. Any questions, Alpesh? Hello?
Yes, SB, I'm here. Any questions coming in through? Or are we happy to go ahead for now?
Okay. I don't see anything here. So, okay, the first thing I'm going to dive into is I have a code model called cheatsheet.ps1, and this is the ISE I'm using. It's called Power GUI Script Editor. It's a free download. It's pretty good. I'm kind of used to it. There were some issues with it, but they're frequently updated. I just want to also mention that what I'm using is PowerShell version 2.0, not 3.0. There are substantial changes in 3.0, and also the default ISE from Microsoft in 3.0 is considerably better. It's just that I have not yet prepared a slide presentation on 3.0 as yet. Okay, no, I thought somebody was pinging me. Sorry. Anyway, so what I have here is there's a cheat sheet out there, PowerShell cheat sheet. It's basically the rudiments of the language itself, and it's a PDF file. Let me just pop it up. Right here, and what I'm going to do is basically I've taken most of this thing and I've come up with a core, like a core set of examples, like right here, that'll give you an idea as to what the language is and what it does. Okay. This is a very simple, almost like a hello world type of a thing. I have a string of which goes in SPSIndia, and I'm going to add something to it. Okay, and it goes into this variable. It's everything in PowerShell, like in .NET, is an object. So all this would do basically is take that string, put it into that object, and it'll write out here. And let me just execute it. And so you should see a green, this thing here, SPSIndia online. It's just a string. That's like a simple hello world right there. Except the string is not hello world. So this is just a very basic, this is a command write host. Basically, it's the write out to the Power Console. And there are some properties you can set. You can turn it to red and execute it again. and hopefully that'll be read, and so on. And this is your simple hello world in PowerShell. Okay. PowerShell can also do an echo command. The pound sign you see here, that the hashtag you see in front of the line is a comment line. So basically what I'm doing is I comment out the code. So when I go to execute it, since the entire script, since this entire file was a script file, it'll execute all the commands that are there that are not obviously not in the comment line. CLS is your standard clear screen. So this one basically will say, this is like an echo command. Enter your name, you enter something, and it'll echo it back. So let's do there, and you get a default thing there. And here I'm just going to say hello world. And so that's your basic thing in PowerShell. Okay, so you have a read host, write host. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to speed this up a bit because I really have a lot to cover. And this may be a bit too basic as well, because I'm presuming most of you are developers too. But if you have any questions or anything, save it for the end of the session, and we'll go over it. Okay. You can also write here in PowerShell. This is a typical way of writing a function. And you can specify, you can cast an object right there. See, this function sum will take in two integers, a and b, just add it, and return back the function value, which is an addition, a summation of these two. So if we execute this code here, we should get hopefully 9. And there we have 9 right there. So this is just a basic structure of a function. So that you have a reserved word, a function, the name of the function, and then you specify the parameters, and you cast it if need be, and then you can have, it's going to have a return statement, and they can do all the. So this is a basic construct of a function. Okay. I have here a couple of examples of I'm going to skip a few, but okay, this is an if then else construct in PowerShell. If we have an object of string green, if A is equal to red, the color is red. If it is white, it'll print out that, or it's another color. So if it is green, if I go to execute it, it should say it's another color. But if I say it is white, it'll say it's white. The color is white. So basically, if you look at the construct of this here, you have the if statement and the parentheses, the conditionals, and then you specify the conditionals. This is one thing we have in PowerShell. It's that's a equal sign dash equal, and then you have the greater to less than, and so on and so forth, which will be there in your PowerShell reference as well. So it's the same as any other kind of if then else conditional statements in other scripting language. So you have if, and then you have these parentheses here that gives you the block of code to execute if there's an if. You have an else if, else, and then it ends right there. But between these parentheses, you can have multiple lines. You can say A is a color, and then in here you can put a semicolon and add another line, another expression, and so on. So it's a kind of a standard if then else if in PowerShell. Okay, I'm going to. PowerShell has a couple of ways of doing for loops. I'm going to let's see three ways. There's a basic for loop here. This is a for A starts at 1, LE less than 10, A plus increment A, and then just echo A. So that's what it looks like. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so this is your standard for loop. And There's another construct for looping. That's a do until. And that just about does the same. You do execute this until this condition happens. Now, there are different ways of using this. It depends on what problem you're trying to solve or what expression you're trying to resolve. So the three basic loop constructs. There's a for loop, there's a do until loop, and then the do while loop. So this is like your terminating condition, and while is the other way around. So I'm not going to execute the other code. I'll just move on to a little more sophisticated example here. What I'm going to do here is I have this example a little more interesting. What this does is there's a for each loop. Then he says, get child item, get me the objects within this directory, within my C Windows directory. And for each item I have, take the name and its creation time. So basically, it is going to look into my C Windows directory, bring up all the files one at a time, takes the name and its creation time, okay, and put it inside, echo it out. So you have an array of objects here, and echo it out into this text file. So just this 3 lines of code will go to your C Windows directory, grab every file, take its name and its creation time, and output it to a text file, ctest.txt. So if we execute this code, okay, script execution is completed. Let me go to that's my ctest.txt file. That's a date and time stamp there. Let's open this, and there it is. Not exactly pretty formatted, but this basically, if you look very closely, it gives you the name of the files that I have and the creation date and time stamp to it. So that piece of code works. Simple piece of code, but what you have to keep in mind is the power of it. Just these 3 lines of code can do that much. And of course, you can get more sophisticated. You can go over network drives and get more properties, name, creation type, maybe archive bits, and all other file properties. Everything in PowerShell are objects. So whatever file object, whatever property it has, you can get that out, even manipulate it or echo it out or whatever. Even out here, you could even dump it to a database. So that's a use of a for each file too. This is another. There's a switch statement in PowerShell too. Out here, same as you have in VB.NET or C#.NET, and oops, sorry. I want to close some windows. The switch statement works somewhat the same way. And I'm going to skip this code because I want to rush things a bit. I have quite a few examples to go through. Okay, what I want to show here is this example here. That was a switch statement. It's the same as you would have in C# or VB.NET. This example basically reads the file we just created and then echoes it out back to the screen. So A here is an array of objects because it's implied. It gets content. It gets the content of this file, and then for each item it gets, it'll echo it out. So if we execute that piece of code, and there it is. That's all. That's what was inside the file, and that file. Oh, that's interesting. There's a null field over there. It's the name of the file and the creation time of it. So that's another way of reading back the content of the text file. Okay, the last example I have in this one here, and this also is a fairly powerful way of, I'm just going to clear the screen up here now. Okay, in your given system, you have a series of processes, and you can look at that very easily when you do a set task manager. These are all your processes right here. You can get all this information. There are a lot of other tools out there. There's Windows system tools and plenty of tools out there. But these two lines of PowerShell basically will get all the processes. You'll get the name of path company, and you'll export it into a CSV file. You can, by the way, PowerShell can write to CSV file, text files, even XML. So in this example, we're just going to write to a CSV file. So if we execute this thing here, it'll get hold of all the processes that are running on my machine right now and dump it into a CSV file. It has just finished doing it, and let's go. That's a CSV file. The date and time shows you that, yep, that it did it. And I open the CSV file, and there it is. These are the name of the processes. This is the path where it resides, where it was invoked from, and this is the company that's made the exe or the DLO of the process. So if you can now, I think you will beginning to appreciate how powerful PowerShell is. It sits on top of .NET, and all these are underneath it all. There are providers and modules and functions that you import into sitting on top of the .NET library, and you can really tap into your own machine, the processes, and Active Directory, IIS, and so on, and we'll show more examples of that. Okay, that's the end of my first module thing. Any questions or anything so far?
As we are not seeing any questions come up so far, so we are good to make the move on the next one.
Okay. I'm just going to speed up a bit.
Yeah, no, that's
okay.
fine.
I have quite a bit to cover. So the next module I want to talk about is really doing a little more deep dive into what an object is and how the .NET objects, how we create it, and how we use it. And in this example here, in the datetime example, it's very straightforward, and I'll simplify it. What I've done here is I'm going to execute this entire big block of code, and then we'll go over it line by line. Okay, what you see here is a string of date and time stamps out there. Okay, what we're doing here basically is we got a command called getDate. It gets a current date, and it'll give you the current date and time. Okay, and I just echo it out. So that's the current date and time. It's Saturday, August 4th, 12:26, and so on. This one here, I'm doing the same thing, but I'm calling the static method now. It'll give me the same. This is an instance of it, and this is the static method on the system. There are subtle differences, but for I'd like you to be aware of it only because later on when you work on some of the other providers, like in system administration, it does matter whether you're taking the static value or not. But just the subtlety of it basically is that these methods that you're seeing here are available to you when you're coding in C# and .NET. That's the essence of it. The next, this piece of line here is, it gives me the this year, or rather, gives me the date and time of the January 1st, 2012. Okay, and I'm storing that in this value over here. Now has a full object of date and time, and what I want now to give me is a day of a week, and that is day of week is Saturday. What I want now is give me the number of days between January 1st, 2012 and now. It's 216.01847 days, total days. Okay. What is the number of hours from the beginning of the year to now? 5,184. And then you can do some other kind of date arithmetic. The key thing here is all this library is really out of the .NET library. You're creating it and you're using it just as you would do in VB.NET, C#.NET, but it is all done in PowerShell, one line at a time, and so on. We in system administration, deployment, and so on, we use date and time quite a bit, scheduling and so on. So this is a good piece of code to get kind of familiar with. That's why I've kind of put it in here. Use this as an example. You can take an arbitrary date and time. When was Christmas Day on 2006? It was here Monday, and so on. So it's very powerful, very powerful. So that's my second module regarding the PowerShell. Any questions?
Nothing so far, SB. I think we are good.
Okay. Okay, good. The next thing I have here is you can extend PowerShell with other .NET libraries and models. In this example, we'll use Winforms, WPF, and your standard Winforms, which was preceded by, which was followed by WPF. So we look into that, and the way that is done is we basically import the .NET libraries. I'm just going to clear this, remove some clutter here. Okay, this is my okay. If we look closely, all we're doing basically is if you've as a Windows developer, I think there's a system.windows.forms that we have to call when we're building a WinForm application. And in essence, we're bringing in the namespace and the DLLs, the libraries in it, and we do the same out here in PowerShell. So we bring it up here, and then we build up a little WinForm app with a little button, and the button has a little text, and then we do, and then there's an add click. So that's your event right there, the add click event, and all the add click event does is closes it and shows the dialog. So you define the event and everything, and then once it's done, it just closes. Very, very simple, almost like a Hello World WinForm app. The key thing, I want to point out something else here, right on the top here, loading the assemblies. You have to load, like we do in C#, we say using system.windows.forms, and then we right-click and make sure that it is in our references list as well. There have been some big changes since I was working on this code. This load with partial name is not a good idea. It works. There's no doubt about it. It worked great in earlier versions of .NET, but subsequent versions of .NET when you code, they're actually, this is being deprecated as of, I think, .NET 4 or 4.5, but this still works though. I'm on, this is still, it still works, but this is, there is something else to replace it. This has got nothing to do with the language itself. It is more to do with where the module is loaded, whether it is in the GAC or whether it's got to grab it from some other place. So this a bit of code change here, but this thing does work. So let's just execute the code, and very simply, it will just bring up, this is a WinForm app, and that's your title over there. It's a little thing here, and basically the event that I have for this for this control is if I click on it, form close. That's it. Very simple, and you can build it more sophisticated. You can add more controls. You can add, other, let's say like here, I defined a button, Winforms button here. So you could define text boxes and list boxes and so on. There's some very sophisticated Winform application you can build with PowerShell. Why do you want to do it this way? Only because if you have some scripting that needs some interactivity, you want to maybe wrap it with a Winform script, like similar to this one. Okay, the next example I have, okay, is WPF. Windows presentation form. There was a which came after Winforms. Winforms is still around. I think it'll be around as long as .NET's around. So Winforms always. But basically, what this does is there is a module out there, a WPF module for PowerShell in CodePlex. Essentially, what they have done is they've taken the entire WPF Windows Presentation Foundation and they've kind of wrapped up all the assembly loading and a host of other libraries and classes that they have in a PowerShell manner. So instead of like right out here, how we did button, new object, Winform button, and so on, they've already defined that ready-made. Say new label, you get a label, as opposed to my label is equal to new object dot label, and so on and so forth. So they've kind of simplified. It's a very nice module for PowerShell to use using Windows Presentation Foundation. So let's just execute this hello world code using the WPF module. This is actually a WPF. There are subtle differences over a Winform app. So Winform and WPF are like the two different versions of a Forms application. I'll take that example and extend it. What this does is it creates a new label, is a font property, and what it also does is let's say it's executed, and then we look at the code. It takes a little bit of time, but there it is. So all this does is basically it gets today's date, it puts it out there. Okay, but the key thing to keep in mind here is that run in as job, it kind of spawns a thread and it kind of increments it over here. So you can, in essence, within your code, as you're executing, you can run like sub jobs. You can like run a sub job and can update it, and this is obviously done asynchronously. Okay, so very powerful concepts. Things when these are the rudiments. When you build bigger scripts, all this can come into play. The last example I have here, this is kind of I was thinking about, is basically since PowerShell sits on top of the .NET layer, you can basically build up your own media player. I've kind of hard-coded where my videos reside. I just don't want to get too sophisticated here. But in essence, what this does is that it goes to this particular video library and grabs video files one at a time and can executes it. And that should be the first video. And then after that's done, it'll grab the next video, and so on. So you can basically build up your own media player, so to speak, using PowerShell. This is a great example. I mean, if you get into the coding portion of it, it's a great way to build up a GUI front end to your PowerShell scripts. So that's how PowerShell would interact with. I'm going to speed it up a bit because I was hoping by this time to be more towards in the SQL Server. Okay, that was that model. Any questions on this?
No, SP, I think you're going great, and I see you still have time, and at the same time you have content. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a lot of code. I like code. I'm a developer, so
No, that's fine. You're doing good.
Okay. Next thing I want to introduce you is to use this thing called WMI. It's if you're in development, specifically if you're in administrator, a SharePoint administrator as well as SQL Server, or just your standard environment administrator, server administrator. WMI, in essence, what it does is there's a piece of, if you look very closely, if you open up services, you will find that there is a process running Windows Management Instrumentation. That is what WMI means. It is a process that runs in your machine, specifically in servers and so on. And in that process, it has a bunch of providers. And there's a set and that monitors your IIS, that monitors your SQL Server, that monitors your whatever other providers that you might have. They're basically called agents. So that these agents, they will monitor your various systems. One is monitoring your file I/O system. So when through WMI, you can find out, this is really getting into the guts of your system. You can find out in your file system what hard drives you have, network drives you have, how many bytes are free, this space is free, and so on. So let's just dive into it. So it's really for system management, and there's a WMI. The entire object, this entire thing has really an API. It has a namespace class and so on. And I've done coding against it in C# and so on. But you can also now script it with PowerShell. So let's just dive into this piece of code. Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to skip a few things, but I'll do this very quickly. Okay, here is a list. This will take a little time. Because the list is pretty big, that's why. Okay, here it comes. If you look closely over here, these are the different names, the classes that we have in WMI. It'll give you information about your BIOS. I'm on a laptop, it'll give me information about my battery. There's a host of information on ASP.NET. And so on and so forth. There's on SQL Server, there's on Microsoft SharePoint. So there's a lot of technical, really getting down to the guts of the system and all the information that is over there inside of the system. So you can find out processes, what printers are connected, and so on and so forth. So very powerful concept. WMI with PowerShell is a very powerful set of tools. Very simple piece of code here. This piece of code just basically tells me, give me drive type 3 is basically fixed drives. I have one fixed drive here. I have this many bytes left. The total size of my drive is that, and this is the name of my volume. And I get that from one line of code right there. And so underneath it, it calls this class in WMI, the logical disk class, from the long list that I showed you a little earlier on. Okay, I'm going to skip that, Here's an example. I'll show you just one line here. Since you deal with SharePoint, you'll be dealing with IIS. This example here will tell you about is your IIS running or not. It's running. That's your process ID. What's its starting mode? It says right your status is okay. That's your state. And there are other properties too, by the way. These are just come for default properties that are picked up here. And if you look closely, I have a computer named PowerShell. This is my laptop over here. When you do remotely, you can add in your remote server name over here too. But the key thing to keep in mind, all the security and all the things got to come into play. WMI does work remote on remote machines too. So there's a bit of security administration to be done as well. So that's an example of WMI working with IIS. And there's also, if you want to find out, this is, when you're a SharePoint administrator, you want to find out whether a particular hotfix has been applied. If you execute this line of code, this line of code will tell you all the quick fix engineering. That's basically a hotfix. These are all the hotfix that has been applied, all the security updates and all that on your server. And if you want to know particularly one particular thing, you can execute this piece of code, and it will tell you yes, that particular hotfix was applied. And you can get more information from that object. Okay, I have a couple more lines here about generating passwords and all. I'm just going to skip that. That's just little syntactic sugar. You can generate random password. So that's a WMI in PowerShell. Very powerful concept, something you really need to know when you get into kind of serious SharePoint administration work. Any questions or anything so far? Alpesh?
No, it's all good.
Okay. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into SQL Server with PowerShell. Okay. When you bring up your SQL Server Management Studio, I don't know if you have noticed it before, so you have a list of databases to go with it. Here's a standard adventure works. You will notice that you have this menu option here, Start PowerShell. If you invoke this, you will get a mini window. It's like a mini SQL Server PowerShell window that defaults to that particular path. It takes the entire server. If you look at the path, it looks, okay, that's a server, that's the machine, default, list of databases, AdventureWorks. So basically it gives you a command line interface to your SQL Server. I'm going through this real fast because I really want to dive into the SharePoint portion soon. So basically you have PowerShell capabilities within SQL Server as well. This is good for administrative work, and but it's a mini window. It doesn't give you the full power of the SQL Server provider of PowerShell. This is just when you want to do kind of quick and dirty, not dirty, but very quick scripting for SQL Server PowerShell. Okay, what I'm going to show is, I'm going to show you a quick demo on PowerShell interacting with SQL Server and getting data and metadata about the SQL Server tables. Okay, what I have here very simply, I'm just going to execute a full line of code. All this does is, once again, it invokes the SQL connection. It sits on top of .NET, it gets in the .NET object. You have your connection string, same as you would do it in any .NET class. Okay. And open the connection, you get a SQL command, you create another object, the command object, SQL command object, and here's a just a standard SQL statement. You take the command, you put it, and you tie it to your connection string, and then you just execute reader. Okay. If you get back any response, you just echo it out, first and last name, and that's the first and last name. So basically, there are a couple of ways of doing this. You can obviously open up SQL Management Studio and type in some select statement and execute it and so on. But if you do not have the SQL Management Studio and you need to obtain data from SQL Server, this is one way of doing it, is to just grab it from SQL Server itself. I'll give one more example of SQL Server. It's the same way. No, let me give you a better example. This just shows you can get data back from SQL Server as an XML too, so that works. Okay, this one is using data sets. Same thing, but it's using data sets here. There are kind of different ways of obtaining the data. And the third example I have, okay, it can also get you back, because the results back before, but we can also look into your database, find out what tables there are, and find out the columns there are, and the type of the properties of the column, with the read-only and so on. And since we are reading, we can also write to it, we can also modify it. So this is like a quick tour on the SQL Server side of PowerShell. Any questions? Okay.
All good.
Okay. SQL Server also has SQL management objects. I'm going to skip this demo, but basically SQL Server, as you know, it's a world by itself. It has other class libraries and objects that you can look into and kind of work against. Everything from setting up batch jobs and brokerages, SQL Server brokerage, just almost the entire SQL Server, you can script. That library is available for PowerShell scripting too. Okay, let's dive into the SharePoint thing. I hope now you have got a good idea as to what this is about. Basically, writing good scripts to manage your entire environment, to work with your file system, to work with your files, you can talk to Active Directory, get your users from there, and then scripting against SharePoint or SQL Server and so on. This is the hierarchy I'm going to follow. This is standard. You have a site, web, list, field, list item, and I have this file here. Okay, I have a good time. We'll go through this. One of the things I want to say is there is a PowerShell command called GetHelp, and if you basically just say GetHelp SPWeb, execute it. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I didn't comment this out. It could execute it. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, now that's some bit of code got executed, and then I didn't want it to. So basically, you can say get help, and you can say get SPHelp minus examples, and execute that. And it'll give you a little help file on how to use the GetSPweb thing. Very helpful when you're initially starting off with PowerShell and SQL Server, SharePoint. So these are the various examples on using GetSPweb command with PowerShell and SharePoint. Okay, so here's a couple more examples here of helping. Okay, I have two strings out here that I've declared. This I should have done before. Okay, this is my kind of my standard SharePoint site. Should have done. Okay, I have a couple of subsites here. This SPSIndia is from last year. I made a presentation last year on using Visual Studio with SharePoint. It's a good developer thing. And I have a couple of other subsites that I use for demo purposes at various code camps and SharePoint Saturdays and so on. So this is like a standard SharePoint site or a foundation. So that's the URL to it. I'm going to create a new site called SPSIndia online site. I'm sorry, I'm not too creative with names over here. And basically, but before we get into that, what I want to show you here okay, GetSPweb, my URL. I have that object over here. Now need to find out more. So I have that object. Now what are the members of that object? Basically, your SPweb becomes, your site becomes an object, and you can invoke what are the different properties in it. Here are the different properties you can apply script against it. It's the entire object model of in SharePoint. Very ready to be invoked, ready to be scripted against. It's another way of doing it. This one gives me more values to it. So these are the different, these are the properties that I have. So here's from that web, these are the sites that I have underneath it. Some author property, title property, and so on. Is somebody pinging me? Oh. Okay, so I hope you're getting a good idea as to now you have this PowerShell and all the libraries and so on, and now we have the entire world of SharePoint that we can script against, use it to our liking. Okay, what I'm going to do here is very simply, I'm going to execute this bit of code. Right now, that particular web here is called SharePoint Portal. I just want to change that. All I want to do is I want to change it to SharePoint India Online Portal. That's it. So in essence, I got a pointer to the URL to web those site. I take the title and I update it. Just those three. You will notice here I have the start SP assignment, stop SP assignment. This is the infamous disposition of web objects, and that takes care of these two commands. You put your code in that block, it takes care of that. It's like think of it as a using statement in your C# code. Okay, so I've executed that. It has finished. If I refresh this should change. There we go. It does change, so the code does work. So that piece of code will change the title on your site. Okay, what I want to do here is I want to create a new site. And let's look at the various parameters. This is my new site thing. If you remember, I declared that a page up. That's going to be the URL. Standard template, STS0. That's going to be the name, SPSIndia Online. And that's going to be the description of it. So let's just execute this piece of code. Very basic. Of course, you can add more properties. If you recall, out here, we have all those properties that we can manipulate. But here I'm just taking some very typical ones and running with it. Okay, so it should create for us a new SPSIndia. Okay, it will be there. The quickest way to get to it, let me just go here. There is SPSIndia Online. I'll click on that, and there it is. So this piece of code has created a site for you. Okay. The other thing you can do is you can write functions, your own functions within SharePoint. Create a function.
Sorry, as we quick one. We're pretty much
okay.
Out of time now. Sorry. So yep, it's probably good for you to try and
wrap it up.
Yep, please. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to execute this bit of code here. Okay. This goes back to the list items. Let me just execute this. What this does is two pieces of code here. This one here will give me a list of my applications and the content databases. This one here will add some name number 5. So two pieces of code. Let me just execute. Okay, let me show you the content name databases first. Yeah, I have run out of time. Sorry about that. But I'm trying to hurry this a bit too fast. Okay, this line over here basically takes my web application and tells me what are the different let me execute this again there. These are the two web apps I have at 100 and default, and this is the name of my content databases. So that piece of line will allow you to do that. This line over here, this piece of line over here, basically executes your it modifies your contacts lists and adds a new item over here. I'm sorry, I've run out of time. I know that code works. Let me go back to my presentation deck. Some resources over here. I'll put that into my slide deck, and that's just me. Okay, I went 2 minutes over. The original presentation was actually 75 minutes. I kind of had to shrink it down too much, but I wanted to really focus on the fundamentals of PowerShell. Once you have that under your belt, the first, say, 20-25 minutes of this thing, all the while loops and all that work, then it's just a matter of diving into the different objects in SQL Server or SharePoint and working with it. Okay. Any questions or anything?
No, SB, I'm not seeing any questions at this point in time. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think it's about time you get some sleep.
Yeah,